Hello and welcome to the final day of our Google Analytics migration series live on YouTube. We're here to answer your questions all about migrating from Universal Analytics to Google Analytics 4. I'm Matt Landers and I'm joined by Carly.
I'm Carly Body. I'm a product manager on Google Analytics 4. I'm excited to be here.
And today is the last day. We've been doing this for the last 4 days, and today we're going to cover everything, just miscellaneous tasks that you need to do for the migration, like linking your ads accounts, setting up user permissions. So what we're going to do is we're going to dive into a quick demo of how to migrate those things over to GA4, and then we'll come back live for your questions. So if you have any questions, make sure that you fill out the form in the description of this video so that you can submit your questions. If we don't get to them today, then we will answer them on Discord. So make sure you join our Discord community. There's a link to that in the description as well. All right, with that, let's jump into the live demo or the pre-recorded demo, and then we'll be back for your live questions. All right, see you in a minute. Hello and welcome. I'm Matt Landers, and today is day 5, the final day of a week-long series for migrating from Universal Analytics to Google Analytics 4. Today, we'll wrap up the basic setup checklist and setup assistant, including ads linking and user roles. If you missed days 1 through 4, they'll be linked in the description below. So you can start there if you need more background or earlier steps. Now that you have your GA4 property, data streams, events, and audiences configured, you've reached the bottom of the setup assistant, and there's only a few additional but important steps left. And at the end, we'll take on your remaining setup questions from today's lesson or any other video this week. All right, let's do this. As you've already seen, important configuration pages can be found in the admin. So we'll wrap up a few more there today, starting with ads linking. If you use Google Ads for your business, linking your Google Analytics property to your Google Ads account can help you understand your customers better and improve your marketing. You can use attribution reports to see which marketing efforts are most effective, import analytics conversions into Google Ads for bidding, and use analytics audience data to enhance Google Ads remarketing. Let's set up your Google Ads links now. Okay, so in the Google Analytics 4 property, we'll go back to the admin. And if you look in the property column at the bottom of the section, you'll see there are a lot of different product links available. There's Google Ads, Merchant Center, Google Play, Search Console, and more. Depending on your business needs, you might want to explore some of these next. For now, we'll focus on Google Ads, which has a helpful migration tool. You could click Google Ads links here and manually go through the steps, but you can also use Setup Assistant to streamline the process of migrating your links from your previous property. So let's go to Setup Assistant and find the Google Ads section. The first row is for linking your analytics property to your Google Ads accounts. If you click the arrow, you may have the option to import existing Google Ads links from your connected Universal Analytics property. This is a way to quickly copy over the links that you had in your original property, so the new GA4 property is also linked to the relevant Google Ads accounts. So go ahead and import those, and then you can mark this step as complete. If your property doesn't have this import option, you can instead manage Google Ads links and manually add the links that way. We'll put a link in the description that walks you through this process for your own property, but it's pretty straightforward. After establishing your Google Ads link, you'll begin seeing Google Ads data in your GA4 reports. Data from this GA4 property is also available to your linked Google Ads accounts. But to use that data in Google Ads to influence your marketing, you have to sign in to your Google Ads account and take action there, like importing conversions for bidding or adding audiences to a campaign for ad group or remarketing. In fact, those are the next 2 steps in the Setup Assistant. You can see them here. We won't go into these today, but there are these Learn More links in the Setup Assistant and also some helpful resources linked in the description of this video on YouTube. So you can get to those when you're ready, and when you're satisfied, of course, mark them as complete too. If you don't advertise with Google Ads yet, you can go ahead and mark these as complete so you know you don't need to think about them for now. And that's it. Those are the basic settings to get your GA4 property on par with your original UA property. I hope you were able to import your previous Google Ads links or set up new ones. I'm going to briefly dip into the advanced setup section with some optional steps to show you where you can manage the other users that have access to this property. User roles are what allow other people, like your teammates, clients, and collaborators, to access your GA4 property. So if you work with anyone else who you want to invite and view or edit this property, this step is for you. Starting from Setup Assistant, let's go down to the Advanced Setup section. These are some additional optional steps you might choose to take. In the Manage Users row, you'll see a summary of this property's user count, and you can hover over that to see how it compares to your original UA property's user count. Then click the arrow. Now you have options, and which is best for you might depend on how many people you need to share your property with. Again, there's a tool here to let you import the users from your original property to your new property. This helps if your UA property had many users and you want the same people from your original property to have access to your new property. If you click this, you'll be brought to the Help Center, which has a link to a Google Sheets add-on that can help you do this. Otherwise, you can click Manage Users, which is also found in the admin page as User Access Management, to add users manually by entering their email address and selecting the role and any data restrictions you'd like applied. So adding the right users to your property is important to get you fully set up and start using the GA4 property with your team or other collaborators. So there's one bonus tip for you. This week, we went through the top basic settings. And if you've been following along, you have most of these checked off now and can see the progress bar at the top, Advanced. Again, if you need to complete some of these actions in Google Ads, we've got resources linked from the Setup Assistant and also in the description below to help you make the most of your analytics and Google Ads links. If you made it this far, congrats! Day 5 is complete. And finally, let's get to your questions. It can be about user roles or admin or any other general migration question that's come to you throughout the week. All right, let's jump into the Q&A and answer those questions. All right, welcome back to the live Q&A. Hopefully that gave you a good overview of how to migrate some of those final things before you're ready to start using your GA4 property. And now let's dive into the questions.
Let's do it.
All right, what do we got? I can't see GA4 Setup Assistant in my account. Please assist.
Let me assist. So you definitely want to be able to find this. You can find the GA4 Setup Assistant in both your UA and GA4 property. You're going to want to go into admin and then in the property column. In the UA property, it will link you to your GA4 property. And in GA4 is where you actually see the Setup Assistant with all of the steps that Matt's been walking you through all week.
All right, thanks for that question. And now for our next question. All right, I have an issue where active users, total users, and page views in GA4 are not internally consistent. How can I validate that the migration for Google Analytics 4 was done properly? Take this one.
Great question. We get this one a lot. So I think the first thing you're going to want to make sure you do if you're comparing to UA is that you have tags on all of your pages and that all of your data collection from UA is moved over to GA4. Whether that's Analytics.js, Google Tag Manager, G-Tag, Measurement Protocol, you want to make sure that that's all moving over. The second thing I would call out is things aren't going to match apples to apples. They definitely should be close, but there are several reasons for slightly different counting methods or ways that we built things differently in GA4. So make sure to refer to our Help Center. We have a lot of documentation here to kind of help you build trust in GA4, understand why things don't look exactly like UA. But in general, I would just run a QA of your data collection to make sure that everything's populating, and then check out the Help Center.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit there is just if you want to validate that the events are making it to Google Analytics, you can use the debug view or tag assistant. And I have a video of that on our YouTube channel to see how to do that. All right, let's jump into the next question. What about configuration of Looker Studio in GA4? I read about a connectivity problem and it is recommended to use Explore section in GA4. How true is this? Well, this was true a few months ago, but my team actually worked with the Looker Studio team to alleviate some of the issues they were having. They are under the same API quota restrictions as everybody else. So we gave them some information on how they can better utilize their quota, and now it should be working for you. So feel free to use Looker Studio. That's a great way to analyze your GA4 data. All right. Thanks for that question. Let's jump to the next question. All right, what is the best way to set up purchase events when purchases happen on a page separate from your main website? We use one property and one data stream in GA4. Thanks. All right, it's good that you're using one data stream. So I assume that you're doing your purchase event on a third-party platform like Shopify or something like that. And some of those platforms, you can give them your measurement ID and they will send those events through for you. So first thing to do is make sure that they don't have that. If they don't have a way for you to connect your Google Analytics property to their CMS or wherever the checkout experience is happening, then what usually happens is they will send you back to your website to a thank you page, and you could send the purchase event through there. But that's a very good question. You definitely want to make sure that you're sending through your purchase events. That's really important for your conversions, reporting, and to be able to bid on them in ads, which we just saw. All right, thank you for that question. Let's get to the next one. Looks like this is the same question on the screen. All right, it's coming through. Bam. All right, is it possible to show some real cases about create custom events with GTM, save with BigQuery, and other examples shown in the video presentations today? All right, yes, it is. I have been working on a tutorial series on YouTube for the last 6 months, and we go through everything from the very beginning, from creating your property, getting your tagging up and running, and I use GTM throughout that entire series. If there's something that's missing from that tutorial series, join our Discord server and ping me on there and tell me, hey, I'd really like to see a video on this. And if other people agree, I'll be happy to add that to the series. So definitely check out those on YouTube. I've been adding those very consistently over the last few months. So, all right, thanks for that question. Let's see what we got. All right. I'm receiving a warning about stop processing data in my UA property, but it's a 360 property. Should I worry about that?
That does sound worrisome, so let me help alleviate. In order to be eligible for the July 1st, 2024 turndown, as opposed to July of this year, you do need to be a 360 property. It's also important that your 360 property has an actively paying contract. So if you stopped paying on your 360 property, it would be turned down this July, not next July. So just make sure you have an active contract, talk with your Google rep or your partner to make sure that everything's all set, that you'll be good for the extension.
All right. Yeah, that would be a little concerning if you weren't ready. All right. What are the differences between GA4 and Universal Analytics algorithms regarding sampling and behavioral modeling? I think you've been like dying to answer this one. So
I love this question.
I'm gonna let you take it.
Let me do some myth busting here. We'll start with behavioral modeling. So behavioral modeling is net new to GA4. And what this does is really allows, today data is becoming more and more sparse. And so what behavioral modeling does is places where we don't have data because of consent or other reasons, we'll take the data that we do have and we'll extrapolate out for the whole, so you can understand how all users are behaving on your website as opposed to just maybe the 30% that you actually have data for now. Behavioral modeling is only in GA4, so that's super exciting. When it comes to sampling, this is kind of a different topic. So sampling in general, I think most of us know, is when you have a large amount of data, but you're only showing some of it. So customers in GA4 that have a lot of data or even just highly structured data, data with high cardinality, can run into certain limits. And this can happen in a few different ways. And we have a few different ways that you can get out of a sampling situation. So the first one is in reporting. You might see the other row. So after you reach a certain number of rows, data starts getting aggregated into the other row. In these scenarios, at the top of the UI, you'll see a little data quality icon with a warning, and you can click there, and then it will give you two options. For 360 customers, you can build an expanded data set. So you just click and you say, I don't want the other row in this report anymore. This report is important to me. I need all of that granularity. Directional isn't good enough. The second option, which is available to free and 360, will link you to Explore. And in Explore, the limits are different. It is limited to last 2 months by default of data. So you might want to increase your data retention up to 14 months for free or 50 for standard or 50 for 360. And then the last thing, I know there's a lot going on here. The last thing I'll mention with regards to sampling is in explorations, we have unsampled explorations. So if you're running into limits even in Explore, then you can run an unsampled exploration, and that's also a 360 feature.
All right. You mentioned cardinality there, which maybe everybody doesn't know what that means. You want to
Yep.
give a quick definition of that? Because if you are sending through custom events or whatever, the cardinality can be an issue for you, right?
Yeah, definitely. So cardinality is like the number of possible values. So for example, if the dimension was like item color and it was yellow, blue, red, the cardinality would be 3. If you're looking at something like an item ID and you have millions of items in your e-commerce store, then all of those IDs are unique, then all of a sudden your cardinality for that item ID dimension is in the millions.
Right.
So not necessarily that, you have a lot of events. It could just be high cardinality dimensions that would cause you to run into some of these limits.
Right. So you want to make sure whenever you're sending this data through that you're aggregating it properly, because you can't really report on something that has millions of buckets.
Exactly. Yeah, and also being judicious about what you're sending. If it's important to your business and you're going to make decisions off it, absolutely.
Yeah.
But you don't need to, if you don't need everything, you don't need to collect everything or send it, or you're not really going to use it, and it is high cardinality, then it might be worth just not including.
Right. All right. Great question. Great answer. Let's get to the next one. All right. I set my GA4 property up a while ago under one subdomain. I have other subdomains I'd like to add to the data stream. What should I do? This is great. If you set up your data stream, you can always go back to the data stream and add more domains under the cross-domain tracking section. And that will allow you to track from, like, maybe you have an offers domain in your main website. From one domain to the next, you'll be able to track that user across all of those domains and keep the same session as they do that as well. So that's a really great question. If you have those domains, make sure you go to your data stream and you are configuring those. You don't need multiple data streams. Just one data stream is perfectly acceptable and better, really. All right, thanks for that question. Let's see what the next one. When I try to import goals from UA to GA4, the message is Google Analytics 4 is not receiving events from Universal Analytics. What do I need to do?
Great question. So the best way to do this is via connected site tag. So if your GA4 property was created via the setup assistant and a connected site tag, then this would work properly. So I would say the first thing you're going to want to do is QA that connected site tag was set up correctly. Outside of that, I think if you're dual tagged, it should still work. So I think in general, you would just need to check your tagging setup there.
Yeah, I think if you're dual tagging, you're just gonna make sure you're sending the same information so that you can get that mapping from one to the other.
Yeah, that sounds right.
All right, thanks for that question. Let's see. All right, what's the best way to get started with multi-touch attribution for B2B businesses? But I think it works for B2C as well. So.
Definitely. Great question. I love this answer that I'm about to give. So multi-touch attribution, we call that data-driven attribution at Google. And in order to get set up with this in GA4, you go through the regular process. You tag your site, you create a property, and data-driven attribution is actually core to GA4's entire reporting and infrastructure. The default property level setting is to be data-driven attribution. So you really get this out of the box once you've set up your property. Important that you have conversion events, whether those are purchases, form submits, because obviously when you're looking at the path to conversion, defining that conversion is important. So once you have your property, your data-driven attribution setting, and your conversions, then you're going to want to look on the left-hand nav of GA4 and go into the advertising workspace. And this is where our attribution reports live. Things like model comparison, if you wanted to compare different attribution models, as well as conversion paths. So we're really excited that we've made this super easy, as well as core to everything in GA4.
All right. Thanks for that answer. I just got a note that I need to clarify something from a previous question, which was the subdomains question. And we just want to also make sure that you are tagging all of your other subdomains as well. I didn't mention that. You do need to add it to your cross-domain tracking in your data stream, but also make sure that you add your tag to those subdomains as well. All right. Let's go to the next question.
Let's do it.
All right, when I go to import ads links, my accounts do show up, but they are unhighlighted and I can't select them. So I guess they're disabled. Why is this?
So this is likely because you've already imported your ads links. If you already go through the tool and import the ads links, then they will be grayed out. I would hover over the checkbox and it will give you a message that says this ads link has already been migrated. The only other case I would say is you have a limit of 400 ads links in GA4. So if you already have 400 ads links on the property, then you wouldn't be able to import any additional.
400.
400.
That would be a lot of links.
Yeah, that's a lot of links.
And it's possible that someone else already imported that before you did, so that might be why you see it as grayed out.
Definitely. And I think just to add to that, like once you've completed that ads link step, mark it as complete so that other people on the property will know this is done and taken care of.
Good point. All right. Let's see what we got next. All right, when running a business that uses Google Ads, does GA4 give any data about ads that the Google Ads website does not? If so, what are they and how can I utilize them?
Great question. So yes, GA4 can bring data into ads. Basically, when you just want to link your GA4 property to your Google Ads account. And then when you look at your campaigns in Google Ads, it'll show you the clicks and conversions driven by those ad campaigns, right? There is a site stats integration, so you can actually modify your reports in Google Ads and bring in additional columns, things like engaged sessions, engaged users, and a few other metrics. So you can actually see after the ad click, after the user came to the website from that campaign, how did they behave on the website? And so to get that set up, you just want to link GA4 to your ads account, and then you modify the columns and bring in those additional metrics, and they're labeled as analytics, so should be pretty simple.
All right, great. All right, for our next question, how do I collect revenue in GA4 after migration as I am unable to find it with the current configurations in GA4?
Yeah, so first you want to make sure that you are sending purchase events. And for that, we have a really great developer site, thanks to Matt's team. And I would check out all of the implementation information there. Assuming that you're sending purchase, and you also want to make sure you're sending the value parameter with the purchase event, that's going to populate revenue. And then once that's being sent to GA4, you'll have a lot of out-of-the-box reports that will help you to kind of analyze this data. On the left-hand side nav, if you go to reports and then monetization, you'll see our e-commerce purchases report, and you'll be able to see item level data there as well that are coming in on your purchases. We also just launched a user purchase journey report in GA4 that's really exciting, that will help you kind of understand those purchase conversions as well.
Cool. Yeah, so if you go to your monetization reports and they're empty, then it's likely that you aren't sending through the events yet. So just validate that you have your purchase events being sent through via your tagging, and make sure you're sending the value, otherwise there's no monetization there.
That's right.
All right, I think we got one more question. All right, if I was using UA to bid on conversions, do I need to change anything once I'm using GA4? And yes, you do. This is very important. You cannot just link your ads account. You also need to go to your ads account and change what you're bidding against from your Universal Analytics goals to your GA4 conversions. That's once you set that as your primary bidding optimization, then you will be bidding against GA4. Now, I will say, if you just set up your tagging and you're just getting your property set up, give it a few days to collect some data, have some conversions come through before you make that swap. If you're seeing this after July 1st and where Universal Analytics is no longer receiving hits for your property, then you definitely want to do that like right now, because you're bidding against nothing. And it's really important that you swap those conversions. Otherwise, ads is going to be very confused and not able to be as effective for you.
Yeah, we also just launched a manual conversion swap tool actually in the ads UI. So when you have your UA and GA4 conversions in ads, then that will help you to make that switch. One other thing I do want to call out, and we've been getting a lot of questions on, is the differences between UA and GA4 conversions. One big difference is in UA, conversions were once per session. In GA4, we don't have that limitation, right? So if you had 3 form submits in one session in UA, it would just be 1 conversion. In GA4, it would be 3. So we did actually launch a setting in GA4 where you can change to once per session counting if you want to maintain the exact same measurement as you did in UA. Now, arguably, all 3 of those form submits are important, so I think the GA4 way of event-based counting is better, but we did create that once per session counting method. So if you want things to be more equivalent and see less variance when you swap those in your ads campaigns, then that could be one thing to consider. But huge +1 to Matt, this is like absolutely crucial to do. When Universal Analytics stops processing data, it will affect ad campaigns that are bidding to UA conversions.
All right, I think that was our last question, which means it is the last question of the series. Sad. But hopefully this was a good series for everyone and that you've got a lot of value out of it. If you have, please leave us a comment, join the Discord server, ping me. We would love to do these kind of series in the future if they are valuable to everyone. So let us know. We need that feedback. All right, so the schedule is over, but I'm going to recap what we've done and then we'll head out. All right, so for this week, on day 1, we got our property set up. On day 2, we got all of our tagging and data collection configured. On day 3, we migrated our events and conversions to our new property. And then on day 4, we migrated our audiences. And today, we got ads linking and user permissions going and answered all of the rest of your questions. If there were any questions that we did not get to in this series, join the Discord server. We'll be answering these. Continue to fill out the form. We want your feedback. We want to get your questions answered, and we will try to answer those on the Discord server. I really appreciate everyone who joined us and submitted your questions. I hope that your journey from going from Universal Analytics to GA4 is successful. Please join the community. Please follow Carly and I on Twitter if you want some more GA information. Matt_Landers.
Carly_Body.
Wow, that wasn't even planned. All right, thank you for joining us in this series, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, happy measuring.